Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. You won't believe the crazy situation I got myself into last week at the grocery store. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how a quick trip for milk and eggs ended with some entitled Karen getting arrested right in front of me. Let me back up a bit and start from the beginning. I had just gotten off a long shift at the construction site and was stopping to pick up a few essentials on my way home. As I wandered down the aisles, grabbing what I needed, I noticed this middle-aged woman yelling at some guy over by the dairy section. Even from a distance, I could tell she was one of those "I want to speak to the manager" types. Now, I try not to get involved in other people's drama, but her screeching voice was impossible to tune out. I edged a little closer, curious to see what had her silk blouse in such a twist. That's when I realized the man she was berating wasn't wearing a store uniform at all. Yet she was tearing into him like he was a minimum wage employee. "Why are you just standing there staring at me?" she demanded. "Go get the manager. I've been waiting here for 10 minutes. The man held up his hands helplessly. "Ma'am, I don't actually work here. I'm just shopping like you." "That's ridiculous," she spat. "I know an employee when I see one. Now stop being lazy and do your job." At this point, I was trying not to laugh at the absurdity of it all. This middle-aged blonde woman had inexplicably decided this random shopper was a grocery store employee, and she was letting him have it for not catering to her every whim. The man attempted to reason with her again. "I promise you, I'm not who you think I am. I don't work here. I'm just picking up some food for dinner." His polite pleas only seemed to fuel her anger. She got right up in his face, jabbing her French manicured finger into his chest. "How stupid do you think I am? I've had enough of your lies and excuses. Now go get your manager before I have you fired." Now, I don't consider myself a confrontational guy, but watching this crazy lady harass some innocent shopper was too much. I decided to intervene before things got uglier. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said gently. "This fellow told you he doesn't work here. Maybe you mistook his clothes for a uniform?" She whirled around to glare at me, blonde bob quivering with rage. "Mind your own business. This is between me and this rude employee?" I held my hands up in surrender, not wanting to provoke her further. But the man gave me a grateful nod, clearly relieved to have someone confirm he wasn't losing his mind. Unfortunately, Karen didn't appreciate me contradicting her twisted version of reality. She turned back to the man and slapped him hard across the face. The crack echoed through the frozen food section, and a red welt instantly appeared on his cheek. "How dare you lie right to my face?" she shrieked. "I'm done with your games." Stunned, the man recoiled, gingerly touching his injured face. But after a moment, his expression hardened. He straightened up to his full height and pulled out a badge. "Ma'am, I tried to tell you nicely that I don't work here," he said coolly. "But you seem determined to learn the hard way." It took a few seconds for his words to penetrate Karen's enraged mind. But when they did, her face paled in horrified realization. This random guy she had abused wasn't an employee at all. He was an undercover cop. She immediately switched tactics, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Oh, officer, I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. I thought you were being negligent. Please forgive me, I was just having a bad day." But her apology rang hollow after the way she had terrorized the man moments before. The damage was already done. With swift precision, the undercover officer grabbed her and spun her around to cuff her. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for assaulting an officer and disorderly conduct," he recited as he latched the metal bracelets around her wrists. Realizing her crocodile tears wouldn't get her out of this mess, she switched right back to rage mode. She began screaming at the top of her lungs, cursing and threatening the cop. "I'll have your badge for this! My husband is on the city council, he'll destroy your career!" Her tantrum only sealed her fate. The officer called for backup to take her down to the station for booking. But Karen wasn't going quietly. When his fellow officers arrived, she made a break for it, high heels sliding comically across the slick supermarket floor. The cops chased after her as she dodged aisles and overturned displays in her desperate bid for freedom. But just as she was almost to the automatic doors, one of the officers drew his taser and took aim. The electrified prongs struck her right between the shoulder blades. With a garbled scream, Karen crashed face first into a pyramid of canned beans. The officers swooped in before she could recover. They slapped cuffs on her and hauled her to her feet. Her once perfectly coiffed hair was now a rat's nest, and bean juice dripped from her cheeks mixing with smeared mascara. She was the epitome of an unhinged lunatic. As Karen was dragged away, she continued making threats against the officers. But they ignored her ravings, knowing she was all talk. The undercover officer she had assaulted gave me a nod of thanks before following them out. And just like that, the ordeal was over. I stood there gaping, my cart forgotten. I had come for milk and left with one hell of a story. My neighbors will get a kick out of this one next time we're grilling in the yard. It just goes to show you never know what kind of crazy you'll witness when Karens are involved. The next one is a pro-revenge story. So this happened about 1.5 years ago, but I recently heard the news on how far my revenge went. I was a Navy enlisted service member and was stationed in Yokosuka, Japan for a few years before I got transferred back stateside. I worked in the main hospital that cared for service members and their beneficiaries. It's a small hospital, so everyone knows everyone. Shortly after I left, I caught wind of a new physician officer working in the radiology department. My friends would say he's horrible to work with, but that's nothing new. However, someone saw him print a letter, left it on his desk, and took a picture of it and sent it to me. He's requesting to move from enlisted housing to officer. Edit. Found out it's not a private letter. He did actually send it to housing, and most of the housing is run by enlisted members. For context, military housing is available for those who are married, have a family, or are qualified based on their rank and depending on the military base itself. Typically, officer housing is much nicer than the enlisted. In Yokosuka, housing is basically the same all around because it's overseas. But most of the housing are apartments, and each apartment complex is called a tower, for example, Fuji Tower. There are 9 towers, and 2 are for officers, since enlisted members outnumber officers by a lot. Now, one thing about the military, stuff happens. When getting stationed, it is the active duty member's responsibility to either apply for housing on or off base before arriving, depending on what is allowed. If there is limited space and you don't apply for housing on time, then you get put where there is space. So our new officer got placed in an enlisted tower. Mind you, enlisted members have families of their own, and other officers have been placed in enlisted housing before without an issue. Here are some quotes from his letter. And yes, this guy has a PhD. I have many valid objections to living in a building of almost all enlisted and even many lower enlisted being an officer. There is a lot of crime, violent actions, drug use, and alcoholism that happen in enlisted housing. There are also sexual assaults and other perverts. I have a good-looking family, a wife and 2 daughters aged 3 and 4. They are prime targets to be victims for these enlisted deviant activities. My family should be safe in housing that is with officers. Officers are much more respectable, and these types of deviant activities are incredibly rare compared to the deviant activities of enlisted being commonplace. Other officer families will not want to visit us because our family lives on enlisted housing. My children need to make friends with other officer children. My wife needs to make friends with other officers' wives. I need to make friends with other officers. Forcing an officer to live in a large apartment building with almost all enlisted is unethical. You get the idea. This guy basically looks down on all enlisted service members, assuming every single one is a drug user, pervert, pedo, criminal, etc. The kicker? He was an enlisted army member before going to officer school. In civilian terms, think of a manager that discriminates and calls all of his subordinates criminals, violent, alcoholics, pervs, drug users, etc. based on your job position, forgetting that some have a family and, maybe aren't any of those things. And he not only has the authority to ruin your work life, he can ruin your personal life, deny days off, make you stay late, write you up if he doesn't like you and not letting you promote. Safe to say, everyone was pissed and I have nothing to lose. I was separating soon and figured I'd have some fun before I get out. I created a burner Facebook account and posted the letter and the officer's picture on a popular military enlisted group page. Within 2 days it spread like wildfire, but I wasn't done yet. The military has something called challenge coins. Think of trading cards, but custom coins that come in many shapes and sizes. I designed one with his face and a big middle finger in the back. On top of that, I designed stickers to show how proud us deviants are. Other coin designs came from other people as well, but so far I think mine was more popular. I sold over 70 coins to the initial person who originally sent me the picture at a huge discounted price, so she can sell them for a profit for herself. So the officer's face is everywhere, because most people keep their coins displayed on their desk. No matter where the officer went at work, he would see his face on someone's desk. And since it didn't have his name on the coin, can't officially say it's him. I sold more stateside, and even some got sent to Europe. I made about $3,000 overall, which was nice. The story even got featured on the online naval newspaper and on 2 popular YouTube channels. And if you're military, you know the only time big military care is when it's too big to sweep under the rug. This story got the officer sent up to captain's mast, which is like Navy court. He tried to say his wife was the one that wrote the letter, but no one is buying it because her writing style is way worse. She even tried to take the fall, but no one believed her. They both ended up deleting all social media. Due to this, he got served 3 UCMJ articles, which basically are his offenses. But there's more. When you're in the military, you have a deadline on how long you can be a certain rank. If you don't pick up, then you're kicked out. And because he's new and got served UCMJ articles, he won't be up for promotion and therefore was involuntarily separated. Also, the officer program he went through pays for his PhD. When the military pays for your PhD, you have to serve 10 years to pay them back. If you don't complete 10 years, you have to pay the military back with money instead of time. So he lost his job and now has to pay back the military for his PhD. And since it takes a while for the paperwork to have him and his family sent back stateside, you can bet he socially suffered because no one worked with him. The next one is a petty revenge story. So the call about the long grass was kind of the last straw thing. The backstory is, my grandpa passed away 2 years ago, and I moved into his house. He was pretty healthy, but he let the yard go down a bit. The grass was maintained, but the trees were overgrown. His pond and patio were dirty, etc. Years ago, our neighbor sold their yard to a property builder. Our properties are in an L shape, so our neighbor was using our backyard as her virtual backyard. For the past 2 years, I have been trying my best to maintain the backyard while also working and dealing with my grandpa's stuff. However, for the past few weeks, the backyard has fallen a bit, as stress from work has crept in and I was sick for a few weeks. Before this, the neighbor has always had nitpicks, but I mostly ignored them. But one day they rang my door to complain about the mess in the back, and I told them, I have a life outside this house. If it bugs you that much, you're more than welcome to do the work. Following that, bylaw came by, and they were very understanding about my situation and gave me more than enough time to feel better and mow the lawn. Well, that whole thing pissed me off, and I wanted to get the typical white picket fence, as there wasn't a fence, and we were passively looking for a dog. So I decided, screw it, and built the largest fence I could, and since her house was right on the property line, she now looks out the window, and instead of seeing my backyard, she sees just a wood fence. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I, 29M, am a staff accountant, having worked at the same CPA certified public accountant firm for 9 years. I've had several coworkers over the years, and by this point I am the most senior aside from the CPA who owns the firm. I love my boss. He pays well, no dress code, doesn't clock watch, and doesn't micromanage. I produce great work for him and he leaves me alone. It could not be more perfect. A little about my responsibilities. I do payroll for about 8 clients, as well as ours, this is important. Books for about 12 others. Preparation of the books for tax returns, as well as work on partnership and corporation returns. I'm basically the business package, really. Of the 5 staff accountants my boss employs, I'm the only one who knows payroll. My boss doesn't know how to do payroll, which is not uncommon, quite a few CPAs out there who don't know it, and my coworkers have no interest in learning it. I don't blame them because I often complain because my clients are really bad about sending correct hours the first time around, resulting in having to redo everything from the pay stubs to payroll taxes. It's awful sometimes, but it's also job security. We recently merged with another CPA firm. My boss ensured that we still only report to him as it's an equal partnership. I don't quite know the workings, and frankly I don't care as long as I only report to my same boss. So our office went from 7 people, 1 CPA, 5 staff accountants, and a receptionist, to 18 people, 2 managing CPAs, 3 people who freshly got their CPA, 11 staff accountants, and 2 receptionists. The other CPA firm was using ADP, third-party payroll service, for their payroll because it's just not a thing anyone knew there. So my boss asked me if I was fine taking on additional employees in ours. which I told him I was since we get paid monthly. The managing CPAs will be managers from here on out. The other CPA firm we merged with made it pretty clear that they didn't like us. I presume it's because their boss was a complete tight ass. He was the very opposite of my boss. The dress code was always semi-formal, and he was just always on someone about something that was wrong. Me having been there the longest, I was highest on the weird office hate thing. It got to the point where I caught them trying to snoop on my computer a few times, which is also integral to the story. My boss just said to start locking my office when I leave now, so that's what I do now. The other manager had a rule where if the receptionists are out, one of the staff accountants needs to cover the front desk. My boss had no issue with that, as that was our rule as well. Luck would have it, both of our receptionists had called out one day. The other manager asked me to cover downstairs for the day. I had told him no, because I am working on payroll all day, and that is sensitive information. I didn't say it was our payroll, but our payroll was on my to-do list. He said he didn't care and told me to get downstairs. I had called my boss, and he had asked me to just please cover and that he would talk to the other manager. The other manager had a big ol' smirk on his face. I reluctantly went downstairs in an annoyed, sour mood, but then a brilliant idea popped up. I'll work on our payroll downstairs. So I started working on our payroll and got all the stubs processed and ready for direct deposit. After that, I started working on the payroll taxes. Think Social Security and Medicare. Part of working on payroll taxes is having a summary of the payroll you just ran. Conveniently, I needed to go to the bathroom, so I minimized all the windows on the receptionist's computer, and I called upstairs to see if someone could cover while I go. As good fortune had it, one of the snoopers was the one who came downstairs. So I went to the bathroom, and I took a little longer than normal because why not? To add additional context, I make considerably more than all of the managing CPA's employees, including his fresh CPAs. I got back to my desk, and he leaves. All my windows aren't minimized anymore. The payroll summary is the first window on the screen. The payroll summary shows everything, and I mean everything. The snooper immediately told everyone, including the other manager. Now all my coworkers already had an idea of what I made. However, the other employees were livid. None of the other employees wanted to work unless they made what I made. The other manager was seconds from blowing a gasket, but he knew there was nothing he could do to me. I asked my boss to show him the cameras pointed at the reception desk so he could see exactly what happened. It was all there on camera that he was going through my work. Needless to say, I don't cover the front desk anymore, and his employees' morale dropped hard. I do feel bad for them, though, even if they are jerks to me. A decent bunch of them left, and maybe about half of them had replacements, so we're down about 4 people. My boss wasn't particularly happy about the situation as a whole, but he said we'll get through it. Morale of the story, don't mess with the only person who knows payroll. The next one is an entitled people story. I need to get this off my chest. As some of you may know, I'm a capybara farmer, and recently, due to the viral trend around these amazing creatures, my peaceful capybara farm has turned into a hotspot for self-entitled content creators looking for their next big viral video. They've trespassed, they've stolen, and they've subjected my capybaras to stressful, inappropriate behaviors. I am deeply disturbed by their lack of respect and total disregard for the well-being of my animals, not to mention the breach of my privacy and property rights. But things escalated beyond belief. Just last week, one of these trespassers, a man looking for some adrenaline-filled footage, decided it would be a great idea to wrestle a capybara. Not only is this incredibly distressing for the animal, it's also dangerous. And surprise, surprise, the man ended up seriously injuring losing part of his genitals. This man, the one who trespassed and harassed my animals, is suing me. Apparently, he thinks I'm responsible for damage to his reproductive organs that occurred while he was illegally on my property and distressing my animals. A few days ago, I woke up to find my capybaras all huddled together in one corner of the farm, clearly terrified. Upon investigating, I found a person dressed in a homemade capybara costume, trying to live amongst them for a 24 hours living as a capybara challenge. It's clear there was some sort of sexual element. Not only had they trespassed onto my property in the dead of night, but they were also equipped with various props and toys they thought capybaras played with. A beach ball and a squeaky toy, amongst other less tasteful things. They were actively trying to coerce my capybaras into engaging with these objects' toys for their video, causing immense stress to the animals. When I confronted them, their response was shocking. They argued that they were doing the capybaras a favor by making them famous. They truly saw nothing wrong with their actions. I had to call the authorities to have them removed from my property. The disrespect for private property, the welfare of animals, and basic human decency has been simply mind-boggling. The next one is an entitled parents story. I've, 21M, been in a surprisingly successful relationship for the past year and a half, ever since I moved to Europe to start my studies. Honestly didn't think I'd hold it together this long, but hey, the girl actually likes me. Shocker. She's honestly perfect. Spiritually, she is a neckbeard, and I love her for it. My parents, not so much. Not because of her personality, they don't care about little things like that. She's European, and that's the problem. My parents belong to a minority in the Middle East. We believe in a lot of things, but the kicker is that if you marry outside your faith, you get excommunicated, disowned, not allowed back in the village, the whole shazam. And since there's so little of us, privileges are handed out so that finding the love of your life would still be possible. Dude down the street assaulted a child. It's fine, we'll just introduce my daughter to him. I'm sure he's a good man. Son fell in love with your niece? It's fine, matters of the heart are complicated. Your daughter fell in love with an Englishman after 8 years of living in England. Burn her at the stake. I feel like my mom genuinely thought that I was going to move back home to the village and meet someone there, like she and her siblings did. But surprise, surprise, I wasn't a fan of it, especially since her siblings consist of her sister, who married a man 20 years younger than her brother, who married his cousin, and her other brother, who's on his third marriage, with a woman who can only be described as a vanilla-flavored biscuit. Ever since I got into a relationship, my parents have been relatively supportive. I feel like my mom was just glad I'm not gay, since I wasn't like the other boys in high school, and my dad, in true dad fashion, was just happy I was getting some. 1.5 years later, they started showing their concern. My dad regularly sits me down for talks about our heritage, and my mom regularly jokes about setting me up with my future bride. Whenever I bring up something remotely serious about my girlfriend, they get visibly upset. I'm in a position right now where I possibly have to move cities. The fact that I want to stay where I am because I'm not exactly enthusiastic about leaving my girlfriend and the life I've built here caused them to short-circuit. All of a sudden, my poor academic performance wasn't due to my many mental health problems or COVID or just my lack of interest in the subject. It was the witch who seduced me and led me astray, because their golden boy is definitely incapable of making poor decisions himself. So yeah, it got to a point where they're trying their hardest to force me to move cities, just to get away from my girlfriend. They're arguing about it every phone call now, and if I just give it time, they're going to add the financial pressure on top of that. That's fun. I just really hope they mellow out soon. If not for me, for my siblings' sakes. I'm the oldest, so I get the brunt of the generational friction. But I only hope it gets better when they get older. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.